Before we open the box, I want to explain the aim of this video. I want to make science and technology easy to understand for everyone. We start with essences. The essence of science is measurement. The measurements drive the science, not the other way around. The essence of measurement is the instrument used to make the measurement. The essence of understanding science and technology, then, can be understanding the instruments. Most of the instruments are easy to understand, with only a few new developments in each century. The 17th century instruments were very easy to understand. While 17th century math and theory were complicated, the instrument makers needed very little of that. Even today, most instruments are built with a collection of fairly simple techniques and formulas. So I started this video with the 17th century and hope to end in later videos somewhere in the 21st. If you follow the series, you may find science has become easy. Time to open the box. This is a Verge Fusee watch movement. It uses the Verge escapement, common in watches until the invention of the lever escapement in the mid-18th century. The rather unusual decoration screams Baroque, indicating a date around 1700. The Tompion regulator indicates a late 17th or 18th century date. The balance bridge is of the French style, and there is an FR stamped on the dial side. The small jewel passes the hardness test and is probably a ruby. The ruby is a faceted jewel, not a jeweled bearing. There is a serial number hidden under the jewel, which might be 338, 388, or maybe 38. The watch was dropped, breaking pivots and cracking the dial side plate. The mainspring also seems broken. I wouldn't think of trying to restore this, but it is a nice 300-year-old thing. Watches like this weren't scientific instruments in the 17th century. They were expensive toys for aristocrats. I suspect, however, that they paid the bills for Thomas Tompion, George Graham, and the others who built instruments for the observatories. The watchmakers were certainly the ones pushing the technology. The highest precision, the use of magnifiers, and the best metallurgy were the requirements of those building the smallest watches. The portrait of Thomas Tompion, for example, shows him holding a watch movement almost identical to the one I put in the box. In addition to the best clocks and watches, Tompion's partner, George Graham, was the maker of the most precise angle measurers, quadrants, and sectors used by early 18th century astronomers. He pioneered the use of a beam compass with magnifier for this work and could see imperfections on the order of 0.005 of an inch. Tompion and Graham used the deadbeat pendulum escapement for very accurate clocks. With a carefully designed pendulum and escapement, observatory clocks were the height of precision in the first observatories. A clock with a deadbeat escapement was the standard of timekeeping for a further 200 years. The simplest observatory of the 17th century had a clock for measuring time, a telescope for seeing planets and the moon, and a quadrant for measuring angles. Here is a brief story of one of the greatest measurements of the 17th century. Giovanni Cassini, head of the Paris Observatory, wanted to measure the distance to Mars. He dispatched his assistant, Jean Risset, to Cayenne, French Guiana, to make measurements. After 2 years, Risset returned to Paris with measurements, wrote a book, and largely disappeared from the historical account. Cassini got his data, wrote a book, and founded a dynasty of 4 Cassini astronomers at the Paris Observatory. Getting the distance to Mars was simple in concept. Measure the angle between Mars and a given star in Paris. At the same time, measure the angle between Mars and the same star in Cayenne. Find the distance between the cities. That distance and the difference in angles can give the distance to Mars. Here is a simple formula. To get the distance to Mars, divide the Earth baseline, the length of the line between the cities, by the angle difference and multiply by 57.3. To get the distance between cities, you need the latitudes, longitudes, and some math to get the chord of the related great circle. Getting the latitude is pretty simple. Just ask the captain of the ship you arrived in. Getting the longitude requires knowing the time difference between Paris and Cayenne. Every hour of time difference is 15 degrees of longitude. Clocks were set to local time in both locations, and the time of the eclipse of a moon of Jupiter, seen simultaneously in Paris and Cayenne, gave the time difference. Cassini and Risset got a decent value for the distance to Mars, and from that and a little more math, a decent value for the distance to the Sun, the all-important astronomical unit. That's all for now. Thanks.